I want to tell you a story about a concrete truck. Now I know what you're thinking. A concrete truck? Stick with me, because this story isn't really about concrete. It's about the moment that experience met data, and what happened when nobody blinked first. It was supposed to be a routine pour, the kind you don't even think about. You've done it so many times it's almost muscle memory. Forms inspected, rebar tied tight, crew in position, coffee consumed, the schedule already running just a little behind. Because it's always running just a little behind, that's basically the state motto of construction. The ready-mix truck rolled onto the site with the slow, unhurried confidence of something that had done this 1,000 times before. Gravel shifted under the tires. The drum rotated steadily. That familiar rhythm that means one thing, and one thing only. Concrete was coming. The driver eased it into place. The foreman gave a short nod, that universal construction nod that means we're good, let's move. Everything felt normal. Until it didn't. The truck stopped short of the forms, not stalled, not broken, stopped. The drum kept turning, but the chute didn't lower. The driver stared at the onboard display. His brow tightened. He tapped the screen once, the way you tap a vending machine that owes you $1. Then again.
And then the truck spoke. Load verification incomplete. Poor authorization pending.
For a moment, nobody reacted. The crew looked at the driver. The driver looked at the foreman. The foreman looked at the truck like it had just insulted 3 generations of his family.
What did it just say? It's the new system. They upgraded the mixers last month.
The foreman stepped closer, boots crunching on gravel.
Authorization pending? From who?
Structural tolerance analysis in progress.
And that's when the mood changed. This wasn't a warning light. This wasn't a glitch. This was the truck. The truck making a decision, pumping the brakes, asking for a meeting. For decades, equipment waited for instructions. You told it what to do, and it did it. That was the deal. That was the relationship. And now, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, that relationship had changed without anyone sending out a memo.
Guess the truck's the boss now.
The truck did not laugh back. The screen lit up with data. Moisture content levels, aggregate distribution ratios, temperature readings from inside the drum, transit time stamps, and then...
Projected slump deviation exceeds optimal performance threshold.
The foreman folded his arms. He had the posture of a man who had seen things, built things, fixed things that other people broke.
I've been pouring concrete for nearly 30 years. That mix is fine.
The truck didn't raise its voice. It didn't get defensive. It responded with numbers. Historical rework probability on comparable pours, 12%.
12%. That number hung in the air like humidity. On paper, it doesn't sound dramatic. 12%. That's not even 1 in 8. But anyone who has ever had to tear out and replace a slab, anyone who has stood in front of an owner explaining why something that looked perfectly fine on day 1 started showing problems 6 months later, knows exactly what 12% really means. It means risk. It means callbacks. It means delay claims. It means a conversation nobody wants to have, usually on a Friday afternoon, usually right before a holiday weekend. The truck wasn't challenging authority, it was challenging certainty, and that's a much harder thing to argue with. Because here's the thing about experience in construction. It is real. It is hard-earned. It is earned through long days and missed holidays and learning from mistakes that cost actual money. The foreman standing at that truck had 3 decades of judgment stored in his gut. He had poured in heat waves. He had adjusted mixes by feel. He had made calls when the clock was ticking and nobody had time to second guess. He didn't doubt himself easily. And he shouldn't.
But the truck wasn't done. Transit time exceeded predicted window by 6 minutes. Elevated curing variability detected.
6 minutes. Traffic had been worse than expected. A temporary lane closure. A flagger running a slow cycle. 6 minutes doesn't sound like much, and in most situations it isn't. But concrete doesn't operate on feelings. It operates on chemistry. Hydration begins the moment water hits cement. Temperature, time, and moisture don't negotiate. They react. They don't care about your schedule or your foreman's 30 years, or the fact that the owner is watching from across the lot. The truck's onboard system had been tracking the entire journey. GPS timestamps, internal drum resistance, ambient temperature shifts. It wasn't guessing. It was comparing live data against thousands of past pours stored in its learning model, essentially asking one very simple question. Has this exact combination of conditions caused problems before? The answer it found wasn't comfortable.
Projected compressive strength reduction, 3%.
3%. Not catastrophic, but measurable. On a non-structural pad, maybe you shrug. On a critical structural element, 3% can be the difference between confidence and doubt. And in this industry, doubt is expensive. The crew shifted their weight. They were watching something none of them had ever seen before, a foreman negotiating with a truck. Now I want to pause here and make something clear because I think this is the part of the story that matters most. Modern ready-mix systems now include moisture probes embedded directly in the drum. They measure how the mix behaves as it rotates. They detect changes in viscosity. They calculate slump in real time, without waiting for a manual test, without depending on someone remembering to run one. The system compares current readings to historical performance. If similar pours under similar conditions showed higher crack rates, it flags it. If extended transit times reduced long-term durability, it flags it. It doesn't feel pressure. It doesn't look at the schedule. It doesn't worry about what the foreman will think. It evaluates probability. That's it. And when something crosses a threshold, it speaks up. The foreman exhaled slowly. He wasn't fighting the truck anymore, not really. He was fighting something more complicated than that. He was fighting the idea that something else might see what he didn't. That is not a small thing to wrestle with.
Start pouring.
The driver hesitated, and before he could move the chute, the truck spoke again.
Risk threshold exceeded. Adjustment recommended.
Recommended. That word landed harder than a command would have, because it meant the system wasn't overriding him. It wasn't locking him out. It was advising him. And if he ignored it, in a world where projects are increasingly documented, time-stamped, and analyzed after the fact, that data trail would exist. That flag would exist.
The truck displayed a suggested correction. Water adjustment, 2.1 gallons. Admixture compensation available.
The foreman stood there. He knew the mix design. He knew the air temperature climbing as the morning wore on. He knew the cost of getting it wrong, not just the dollars, but the kind of erosion that happens to a reputation when something you built doesn't hold up the way it should. He had seen hairline cracks spider across slabs weeks after a pour. He had seen owners get quiet in a way that meant lawyers were about to get loud. He also knew this. The truck wasn't trying to make him look bad. It was trying to make the pour better. The crew waited. Nobody wanted to be the one who rushed the decision.
Make the adjustment.
The driver entered the correction into the system. The drum rotated differently, compensating for the updated parameters. Sensors recalculated. Moisture readings stabilized. Temperature projections updated. The screen paused. For a few seconds that felt longer than they were.
Then, parameters within optimal range. Pour authorized.
The chute lowered. Concrete flowed. On the surface, it looked like any other pour. Rakes spread the mix. Vibrators hummed. Screeds leveled the surface. Boots moved in the practiced choreography of a crew that knows what it's doing. But something fundamental had changed on that site. Not in the mix, in the approach. The truck hadn't taken control. It hadn't embarrassed anyone. It had done something simpler and more important. It asked a question. It provided evidence. It offered a solution. And once the solution was verified, it stepped back.
Later that afternoon, as the last section was finishing, one of the laborers asked quietly, "So what happens when the truck disagrees next time?"
The foreman didn't answer right away. He watched the surface being troweled smooth. He thought about how many times over the years he had relied on instinct alone. How many adjustments he had made by feel. How many times he had hoped conditions wouldn't shift too much before the pour was complete.
Then he said, "Next time we listen first."
That didn't mean surrendering authority. It meant expanding it. Because the reality is that equipment is no longer passive. It collects data. It processes information. It compares current conditions against historical data sets so large no single human could hold them in their head. It identifies patterns that fatigue hides, that habit overlooks, that schedule pressure pushes past. Machines don't get tired. They don't get impatient. They don't glance at their phone and think about what's for lunch. They evaluate inputs. And when something crosses a threshold, they say so. Some people hear that and feel threatened. I understand that reaction. When you've built your career on experience and judgment, it can feel like someone just questioned the foundation of everything you know. But here's another way to look at it. Imagine a job site where smart mixers prevent weak pours, where cranes pause lifts in unsafe wind conditions, where excavators detect unstable trench walls before collapse, where compaction rollers measure soil density with precision instead of approximation. That world isn't coming, it's already here. And the professionals who will thrive in it aren't the ones who fight it. They're the ones who learn to work alongside it, who bring their 30 years of judgment to the table and add a layer of real-time verification that doesn't get tired, distracted, or rushed. The foreman didn't lose control that day. He gained information. He gained documentation. He gained a second set of eyes that happened to have better chemistry than his.
As the truck cleaned out at the wash station, the driver shook his head slightly. "Never thought I'd see the day," he said.
The foreman looked at the truck one more time. "Neither did I," he replied. "But if it keeps us from tearing something out, I'll take it."
The sun was higher now. The slab was smooth. The schedule was still tight, but the risk had been reduced. And maybe that's the real story. Not that the truck talked back, but that when it did, someone listened. Because concrete doesn't care about ego. It doesn't respond to confidence. It responds to conditions, temperature, moisture, time, chemistry. And if a system can measure those variables more precisely than any one person ever could, that isn't a challenge to authority. That's a tool. The question was never whether equipment would continue to get smarter. It will. That ship has sailed, and it didn't ask for authorization first. The question is whether the people running the job are willing to evolve with it. On that job site one morning, a truck paused before pouring. It asked for authorization. It offered a correction. And because of that pause, that data, that adjustment, the project moved forward stronger than it would have otherwise. Sometimes the future of construction doesn't arrive with a bang. Sometimes it arrives with a quiet message on a screen. Pour authorization pending. And sometimes the smartest move you can make is to stop and listen.